Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the City of West Palm Beach's HOME-ARP Informational Session. Can everybody hear me okay? So we are scheduled to start at 10 a.m. I'm going to give it a minute or so to allow more people to come in. Thank you. I see everybody can hear me. I'm going to give it another minute or so to give a chance for others to join. While we wait, feel free to say hello in the chat and introduce yourself. Morning, Tammy. All right, so to just go over some webinar logistics, let me change my slide. As you join the meeting, all attendees are muted. We ask that you stay muted. We will have a segment of the webinar where we'll have open discussion. At that point, you'll be free to either type in your comments in the chat box, or you can, if you indicate that you'd like to make a comment or provide some input, we'll be able to take you off mute so you can address the audience. If you have any trouble hearing us during the webinar, and if you're using your computer audio, I want to encourage you to switch to phone audio. Usually that would help with any issues. And again, this webinar is being recorded so that we can post it later on our website. So again, I want to officially welcome you to this HOME-ARP Informational Session. My name is Kimberly Spence, and I am the Programs Manager for the Housing and Community Development Department. Our director, Jennifer Ferriero, was hoping to join us this morning, but she is delayed in another meeting. She may join us later. On the line, I also have Lisa Kemp, and Lisa is the Community Resources Manager for Vickers House location. So if you work with the homeless population here in the city, you're probably familiar with Lisa and the team over at the Vickers House. Also want to mention that we have Charity Lewis on the line, and Charity is our Community Engagement Manager here in HCD. She's going to be helping me manage the chat, and I'll also be asking Charity to post some information in the chat as I go along with the presentation. All right, so we are here today to talk about the Home Investment Partnership American Rescue Plan program. And that is a long program name, so you've already heard me refer to it as HOME-ARP. And this is a new resource that the city will be receiving. We have not received this funds as yet. It's a new resource. It's based on a HOME program, which if you're familiar or if you've worked with the city before with the HOME program, it's based on the HOME program, but has some different rules and different requirements that we're going to talk about briefly today. But the main purpose of this meeting is really to hear from our community partners and our stakeholders on how to use this new funding source to have the maximum impact for the population that it serves and those that have the greatest need. So we are going to be trying to gather information from you all about the needs and challenges of the qualifying populations. And I'm going to define for you on the next couple of slides the eligible populations that can be served by the HOME-ARP program. We also want to identify gaps in the resources for the qualifying populations. As part of the procedure for receiving these funds from HUD, we have to prepare what's called an allocation plan, and a component of that allocation plan is the needs assessment and gap analysis. So a big part of the reason for this meeting and the purpose of this meeting and the follow-up that we'll have after this session is to collect data that will be included in the needs assessment and market analysis. Also, this is an opportunity to identify potential collaborations for the HOME-ARP funding in all of the programs that we administer here at the city through the Housing and Community Development Department. We partner with community stakeholders and agencies or organizations that work with the clientele that the program is intended to serve. So we'd love to hear about any upcoming projects that you're working on that could potentially be eligible for funding under HOME-ARP. And bottom line is we'd like to hear your feedback so that we here at the city can form a basis for how these funds are going to be distributed for eligible activities going forward. I do want to clarify one thing in case we have any residents on the line that are seeking assistance for rent assistance or any kind of housing assistance. I know once we started advertising this meeting, I've been getting calls from a few residents that are looking for assistance. So this is not the form for that. This is a planning meeting to talk about how the funds will be used and distributed later on. But if you are here for that purpose, I do invite you to stay on and listen on and participate in this meeting. And I'm going to ask Charity to, in the chat, just post the phone number for our department so that you can jot that down. And basically, if you are seeking any kind of assistance, you can just give us a call and we'll be able to refer you to potential program that could assist you. All right, so our agenda for today is basically, I will be doing a high-level overview of the HOME-ARP program. I'll be talking about eligible activities and about the qualifying populations. I'll speak briefly about the allocation plan that we are required to submit to HUD in order to receive the funds. And then we'll have that open discussion and conversation to get input from our stakeholders. And I'll wrap up with just the next steps in the process of preparing the plan and getting the funding secured. So just to give you some background about this program, the vision of HOME-ARP is really to improve housing outcomes for the homeless and to reduce the likelihood of homelessness for those that are at risk. And so this is a program that was created and passed under the American Rescue Plan Act in March of 2021. The American Rescue Plan Act provided $5 billion of supplemental home funds, again, for assistance to homeless and other vulnerable populations. Of that $5 million, about $1.7 million will be coming to the city of West Palm Beach, and that money is going to be administered by the Housing and Community Development Department. So the purpose of the funds is to invest in permanent housing for these qualifying populations, to upgrade available stock of shelter, and the provision of rental assistance or supportive services. And so HUD uses a formula that they created to determine exactly how much will be awarded to different localities. Again, our allocation here at the city is $1.7 million, and that's based on looking at data on the poverty rate in the city, renters that are living in poverty, the cost of housing, the availability of housing, and the condition of the existing housing stock. So in terms of who would be eligible for assistance under this program, there are 4 qualifying populations, or QPs as this is being referred to. The first qualifying populations are individuals and families that are experiencing homelessness, those that are at risk of homelessness, families and individuals that are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. And the last category is other populations where providing supportive services or assistance would prevent the family's homelessness or would serve those at greatest risk of housing instability. So that other populations category includes households that would not qualify under any of the other 3 qualifying populations. And then at the bottom of the slide, you see I pulled out veterans and families that include a veteran family member. Veterans are not a separate qualifying population, but it was the intent of the program that it would serve veterans as part of this program. But in order to qualify for assistance, a veteran or a family member would have to meet one of the other definitions of qualifying populations. I want to point out in terms of eligibility that this program is different from the other programs that we work with commonly in terms of how individuals and households are qualified. Typically, we work with programs that are based on income eligibility as determined by the size of the household. For the HOME-ARP program, qualification is based on the status as a member of one of the qualifying populations. So it is important to be able to document and to show, based on the definition of each of these qualifying populations, that someone is experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness in order to show that they are eligible for assistance. I also want to point out that if you've worked with other HUD programs, like the COC programs, that serve similar populations, persons experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness, that the definition under HOME-ARP for these populations is different from the definition of homeless and at risk of homelessness in other programs. So at this point, we're not going to get into the details of what the definition of these categories. At this point, I'm going to ask Charity to, in the chat, to post a link that will take you to some HUD guidance that is really like a 90-page document that is the rule that governs the HOME-ARP program. So in that document, if you're interested in this, it will have the definition for qualifying populations, the eligible activities, and all the rules associated with the program. So in terms of eligible activities, these are the range of activities that can be carried out with HOME-ARP. You can acquire, rehab, construct affordable rental housing. You can also operate a tenant-based rental assistance program. So this is a program that's similar to Section 8 program where the household pays a portion of the rent. The assistance is specifically for the household. It's not with the unit, so they can select a rental apartment at a reasonable rate anywhere in the community, and the program pays the remainder of the rent. Other eligible activities include supportive services, homelessness prevention services, housing counseling, and then the fourth category is acquisition and/or development of non-congregate shelter. So again, this program was created in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so instead of adding more beds to emergency shelters, this program allows for the development or redevelopment of non-congregate shelter. So a common activity we've seen other communities do with other funding sources that allow this is acquiring like a motel or some kind of property like that and converting it to a shelter. And then the remaining activities are all administrative type activities. 15% of the city's award can be used for administrative and planning costs, and another 5% can be used for nonprofit operating assistance and nonprofit capacity building. So these are maximums that can be set aside for those purposes. I wanted to touch a little bit on eligible supportive services costs. Typically under the HOME program, this is not an eligible activity on the regular HOME program, but under HOME-ARP, this is being allowed. So you can see here that the program, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but the program does provide a broad range of supportive services for the qualifying population. Another unique thing about this is that the supportive services do not need to be provided in combination with one of the other eligible activities. It can be a standalone activity. So it's in the event of, if we were to do an affordable rental development, for example, supportive services could be a component of that project as well, but it's also eligible as its own activity where the city could award funds to an agency or an organization to provide some of these types of supportive services. In terms of eligible housing counseling activities, there are 3 categories of housing counseling activities that can be carried out under this program. The first one is rental housing counseling, and these are some of the items that could be funded or counseling that could be provided under this category: rental search assistance, assistance with rent delinquency or understanding the terms of your lease. The other category is pre-purchase home buyer counseling. This includes budgeted and credit counseling, loan product comparison, fair housing and predatory lending counseling, and also housing search assistance. And also the third category is homeless services counseling. So this is where you could provide referral to other resources or to other emergency services. I want to point out here that under housing counseling, it does not include housing counseling around persons that may be facing foreclosure or may have a mortgage delinquency or any type of financial management for any household that is existing homeowners. So housing counseling to current homeowners is actually an ineligible activity under the HOME-ARP program. And again, just want to talk about the city's allocation. So as I said, we will be receiving about $1.7 million. And to put this in perspective, annually, the city receives home funding under its regular allocation. This upcoming year, October 2022, we'll be receiving about $500,000 under a regular home allocation. So you can see that this award of the $1.7 million is about 3 times what we typically receive from HUD through the HOME program. Now, that being said, given the need in the community, $1.7 million may not go that far. It depends on the type of project that we decide to do. But it is a good start in terms of providing gap financing and leveraging other private and public funds to provide the housing or services that are needed in the community. And again, as you can see in the chart here, the majority of the funds, at least 75%, would have to go to HOME-ARP projects. So the supportive services, acquisition and development of non-congregate shelter, TBRA, or the development of rental housing. But we do have that max where we can use up to 15% for admin, or we could choose to use 5% or an additional 10% in total for nonprofit operating assistance or capacity building. And in that case, that's not a requirement that we have to do that. It's an option that the city can choose to do. And in that case, if we did decide to provide some funds to nonprofits, there's an expectation that that agency or nonprofit is also going to be carrying out a HOME-ARP eligible project. And that has to be performed within or awarded within 2 years of the award of the nonprofit assistance. All right, so before I get into the allocation plan, are there any questions in the chat so far? Charity, I don't know if you've been...
Sure, there were a few questions. There was a question regarding youth that age out of foster care. Would they qualify as part of the qualifying population?
It is a possibility. Again, the definitions for each of these subpopulations are multi-part. So some of the definition, a portion of definition is borrowed from some of the existing HUD programs. So it is possible that youth aging out of foster care would qualify, but I would direct you to look at the guidance that Charity posted earlier to see each category and subcategory of eligible population, sorry.
And then there was an additional question. Will this PowerPoint be shared with everyone after the session?
Yes, we are going to post PowerPoint. I'll also be emailing it out to those that registered for the webinar. So you will get a copy of the PowerPoint, and the recording will be posted as well.
Thank you, that's it.
I think I saw another question in here. I'm trying to get to it about the expenditure deadline. So this, for the expenditure deadline, the funds will be available to the city until September 30th of 2030. So that's a statutory requirement. I believe these funds expire after 8 years. So that's the deadline to actually expend the funds. At that point, any funding that we still have in our coffers will go back to the Treasury. All right, so moving on, just want to talk briefly about the allocation plan that the city is required to prepare. Part of the process of preparing the plan is doing this consultation with our stakeholders and getting input from community and residents as well. But the points that you're seeing on this slide are the sections in the allocation plan that we have to respond to. The first requirement is to prepare a needs assessment and gap analysis. And so this is where your input is going to be very helpful in terms of providing data and information on the needs of the qualifying populations. We also have to identify the HOME-ARP activities and the budget that we're going to establish for each project or activity that we decide that we want to fund. The third section of the plan is the HOME-ARP production goals. So if the city decides to fund a rental housing project, we will be required to determine or estimate the number of housing units that will be created with the funding, and those goals have to be included in the plan. Then another section of the plan is preferences. So under the program, the HOME-ARP program, we're able to apply preferences in terms of how applicants are selected and the order of selection to a program or to a project. We are not required to do this, but it is an option to identify preferences. And that's going to be based on the needs that are identified in the community, whether we would want to go that route. So a preference could be with an entire qualifying population. So we could say we have a preference for persons that are experiencing homelessness, or it could be a subpopulation, such as persons that are chronically homeless. So, so that would be one component, is the identification of preferences. And then the final section of the plan is the refinancing guidelines. And this is only applicable to if the city were to use the HOME-ARP funds to refinance any existing debt in a multifamily rental project if we were to rehab that project. So we would only have to provide some guidelines around refinancing if we determine to do a project like that. So a little bit more on the, change my slide, on the needs assessment and the gap analysis is, again, this is a major component of the plan where we have to be able to describe, based on quantitative and qualitative data, the size and the demographic composition of all 4 of the qualifying population. So this program is really intended to serve and all 4 qualifying populations. We cannot exclude any qualifying populations. All 4 of those groups have to have access to the funding. And so we have to include in the plan not only data on the need, but also on the narrative describing the population. So this is where our request will come in of, if you do serve any of these, if your agency serves any of these qualifying populations, do you have data that we could include in our allocation plan that we would submit to HUD? We also have to describe in the needs assessment any unmet housing and service needs. We have to identify gaps within the current shelter and housing inventory and service delivery system. Of course, we need to assess the priorities of the groups that are eligible to be served under each of the eligible activities. So at this point is where I'm going to invite those of you on the line that would like to make a comment to participate. I do see that we have a couple questions in here. Wendy is saying, have you thought about partnering with Palm Beach County and jointly working on the needs and gap analysis? And Wendy, yes, we've definitely thought about that. We are required to consult with the COC, and I think this is a good opportunity for the city and the county to work together and to collaborate to make sure we have projects that work well together and that we're not duplicating efforts. So yes, that is something that we will be doing. And then we have a question here. Could a single family homeowner be considered for temporary refinancing or only multifamily projects? Again, the home eligible activity is refinancing of debt for multifamily rental projects. So no, the assistance could not be provided to a single family homeowner. And so I welcome you now to just type in any comments you have, or if you want to raise your hand, and Charity would help me with taking people off mute if you want to make any comments. On the screen, you can share just about your organization and what services you provide. If you have information on just the general housing need in the city that you want to discuss, or barriers to finding rental housing, which we know is a real issue in the city of West Palm Beach and Palm Beach County overall, you're welcome to share about that, or any priority needs of the populations that you serve. You are welcome to do that at this time.
Kimberly, we have one question in the Q&A. Since there is limited funds, could West Palm Beach work with other funding organizations to concentrate the funding into a larger project, more of a comprehensive solution?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Sure. Since there is limited funds, could West Palm Beach work with other funding organizations to concentrate the funding into a larger project?
Yes, definitely. And I talked about that earlier about using these funds to leverage other resources. One of the things we know that there, because of COVID, some significant monies that came to the county and to other agencies, that we want to make sure we are aware of what is available so that we don't duplicate programs that already exist or the efforts that are already ongoing. But yes, we can work with partners, whether that be the county or other nonprofits or agencies that can to have a greater impact on the community. And that's typically how the HOME program and other programs that the city administers operate. Any other questions?
Okay, yes, there are two more questions, and then we have a raised hand. If a resident owns multiple properties with assistance to be offered to rehab, if a resident owns multiple properties, will assistance be offered to rehab and turn into affordable housing?
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you, Charity. Your question is, if we provide rehab, would it be turned into affordable housing?
If a resident owns multiple properties, will assistance be offered to rehab and turn the properties into affordable housing?
So if it's the owner-occupied situation, that is not something that would be funded under this program. We can use the funding to rehab affordable rental housing. Typically, that would be done with probably in partnership with a developer that has experience doing that kind of work in developing housing or rehabbing housing, and it would have to remain affordable housing for a certain time period. One of the requirements of this program, and again, this would be in the guidance that we put in the chat as far as the rental housing component, is that at least 70% of the HOME-ARP rental units have to be provided to the qualifying population. So if a housing project is developed with HOME-ARP funds, 70% of the units that are designated as HOME-ARP would have to go to a member of the qualifying population. The other 30% would have to income qualify, so that would be based on the income level for the household.
Okay, then we have another question from A. Marcel. How does this program existing single-family homeowners?
How does
this program assist?
Existing single-family homeowners? Well, if we looked at the eligible activities and the vision that we talked about for the program, this is really to address persons, to assist persons that are experiencing homelessness and to assist renters to find affordable housing. Based on my review of the guidelines thus far, I don't see that it would be, there's any eligible activity for current homeowners. That being said, there are other programs out there that may be available, that are available for homeowners. So if that's something that you see as a need, again, I encourage you to reach out to us and we can discuss what your particular situation is.
All right, then Terry Murray had a question. Go ahead.
Well, actually, hi, this is Terry Murray. I'm with Neighborhood Renaissance. We're an affordable nonprofit housing developer. And actually, I have 3 comments. One is, and concerning need, that we would, it's obvious there's a shortage of inventory, and the populations targeted for this funding are really the most affected. We own rental housing and we have 0 vacancies and really don't even have the capacity to keep a waiting list anymore. Secondly, the market is insane, as everyone knows, and we'd like if possible, if there are existing properties, I would just advocate in the plan that preservation and rehab of existing properties, because these tenants are at risk for homelessness. I mean, we're seeing folks being displaced every day due to the market. And finally, construction costs has risen in the last 2 years exponentially. And just to keep in mind that there are existing projects in the pipeline that now are at the bidding stage, and that if there's gap financing needed due to construction increases, that is also a need. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And as far as the distribution of these funds, like I said, we haven't yet decided what type of projects the city will be funding. But going forward, I'm sure, depending on the nature of the project, we will be putting out information to the community. There may be a solicitation, like a formal solicitation process, especially if we decide to fund a rental housing project, to identify and select developers that we can partner with that have additional resources, that may have properties that that we know have the experience and the capacity to carry out a project like that.
All right, Kimberly, we have 3 more questions. Question from Dana LaCourt. Would homeless homemakers due to divorce be included in eligibility groups?
Homeless homemakers. So again, the definition of homeless, there's several parts to the definition of homeless. One part of it is the traditional definition that some of us are familiar with, which is literal homelessness, living in a place that is not meant for habitation, like living in your car. But there are other subparts to that definition that someone that is homeless, a homemaker, may qualify under as well. So again, I don't want to get into the specifics of that, And there's other categories that someone that you are describing could qualify, such as at risk of homelessness, or even if they don't qualify under those categories, that other population that talks about a household or individual with the greatest risk of housing instability. The definition for that is looking at the income level of the individual or the household. So someone that meets that definition could also qualify there. So there's a lot of, within those 4 categories, there's so many parts to the definition that there are opportunities for a wide range of households and individuals to qualify.
Okay. Would it be required that for the use of these funds that the project be located within the city of West Palm Beach?
Yes, typically for the allocation that comes to the city, the projects would be within the city limits.
Okay, and then lastly, will there be an educational component to the supportive services like financial literacy or budgeting?
Yeah, I believe that's one of the, go back to that slide, that's one of the eligible activities under supportive services. You see the last bullet on the right is financial assistance costs. We can do housing counseling services and housing search activities. So that's a very broad category there. So even if something's not listed here, it's possible that it would still qualify as long as the household or the individual that's being assisted is a member of the qualifying population.
Okay, that's
Any
all
more
the
questions?
questions.
Okay. All right. So I am going to move forward with our data request. So as I mentioned before, we will be preparing a needs assessment and gap analysis. So we have to include data on the size and composition of the qualifying population and information on existing resources and any anticipated resources for activities that may also be eligible under HOME-ARP. So you see here my email address, which this PowerPoint is going to be emailed to you, so you'll have my email address. Charity can also put it in the chat. But the follow-up to this is going to be a survey that I will be emailing to the registrants for this webinar. That is going to, I believe it's the 8 or 9 question survey that we can use to collect information about the things that we've spoken about today, what the gaps are, what the needs are, should there be a preference, what groups should be identified for a preference, if any. And so we want to collect that information from you, and we figured a survey would be the best approach to that. So if you didn't get a chance to, if you want to think about what we've talked about, you didn't get a chance to chime in today, we also encourage you to share the survey with your partners so that they can participate as well. And so we have a deadline of June 3rd that's about 2 weeks from now for that response, so that we can get that information as we're drafting the allocation plan. As far as next steps in the process, I believe this is my last slide, but as far as next steps, want to encourage you to obviously provide that feedback to the survey and to stay involved in the process. We do have another meeting upcoming. The final date has not been determined, but around mid-June would be a needs assessment meeting for our annual action plan. So as I mentioned before, the city receives funding through the Community Development Block Grant, the regular home program, and the HOPWA program, which is housing opportunities for persons with AIDS. We get a new allocation of funding under those 3 programs every year, but we are also required to prepare a planning document, which is the annual action plan, which outlines the budget and the activities and the goals for those funding sources. So we will have a similar meeting like this around mid-June, where we'll talk about those 3 funding sources specifically. You can also stay engaged by submitting comments on the HOME-ARP Allocation Plan and the Annual Action Plan when they're posted. We expect to have the drafts of these plans available in July. They will be posted to our website. We'll have a notice in the newspaper of the availability of both plans. And also we'll be able to email that out to our stakeholders that we have on our email list. So that's another opportunity to comment on the final activities that are selected and included in the plan. And in August, we intend to take both the HOME-ARP Allocation Plan and the Annual Action Plan to City Commission for a public hearing and for approval of those plans so that we can submit them to HUD. There is no deadline for the HOME-ARP Allocation Plan, but we do have a April 15th or 16th deadline for the Annual Action Plan. So we are combining our planning process for both plans and just to coordinate everything. And so we're planning to, like I said, to bring both of those plans to the August 8th meeting to get commission approval. So if there are any more questions or any more comments before we sign off? We can do that now. This is my contact information once again. The link here is to the Housing and Community Development website. Like I said, this is going to be emailed to you, so you'll have, this is a live link that will take you directly to our website, and that's where all our notices will be posted. The draft plan will be posted as well for review, and any updates or changes will be on our HCD webpage. At this point, yes, I see Charity sending me a message. We have the link to the survey that we can post right now. So as we wrap up this meeting, if you have time and you want to do the survey right now, the link is in the chat. Like I said, it's an 8 or 9 question survey. It's asking for not actual, you don't have to provide any data or reports, but just your views on how the funds should be used. So if you want to do that, you can do that right now. Again, the link will be in the PowerPoint that we send out. And I encourage you to share the survey, share this PowerPoint, share this information with other agencies and stakeholders that you work with so we can get the maximum participation as possible. And with that, I just want to thank all of you for joining us today and for participating. I hope this was informative for you. I look forward to the input that we get back during this process and to your comments on the plan when it becomes available. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.